You know, there are a lot of amazing hobby products out there that when the stars align are perfect to fit your needs. This video is not about those products. What it is about is a handful of hobby tools that I've found myself using in every single project in 2025. You know, if only we had unlimited disposable income so we could just buy every single miniature product under the sun. But that's not the case. So what I've decided to do was keep a really close eye on all the new purchases that I've made over the last year to determine which ones give me the best return on investment. So today, let's go through the list of my top 8 products that since I bought them have made their way into nearly every single hobby project I've done so far this year. Oh, and none of these are sponsors in any way for today's video, just so you know. Right off the bat, let's start with a thing that I've gotten the most questions about recently, and that is my brand new wall-mounted paint rack setup. These are a modular paint rack system by a company called What's in the Box. He's actually a buddy. I bought them through his Etsy shop. He's got a website you can check out as well. And why I love them is that they're so customizable to your needs as a painter, and they can evolve with you as your paint collection evolves. You see, only this back plate goes on your wall, and all of the brackets that you put into it are cut to a specific size for different size paint bottles or pots. And you can simply take those off, redo them for different size bottles as you need later, whether you're expanding a certain range or you're now finding yourself using less of another brand and you want to use that space for new paints. So yeah, they're pretty easy to put up. You just have to make sure that these back plates are level and they fit really snug together. So you have a nice seamless wall that can continue to grow as your paint collection grows. You will have to drill these into the wall, but I found it's pretty easy to patch the holes if needed. But these are the only things that are permanent. Even the side parts and the little parts that the paint bottles go into aren't actually glued in. They're all kind of snug fit. So you're never like permanently making a decision on which paint racks to put where, because you could just pop them apart like Legos later on if you need to. So yeah, they give you a really clean look. They're really easy to paint or stain. I went with a dark black brown stain for mine, and as a bonus, they smell amazing. Next up is the Fantic multi-use rotary tool. You know, over the last year, I've done a lot more dioramas, more complex base builds, more custom kit bashes, like my Mad Max Orc projects, and I found that needing a really nice rotary tool that fits snugly in my hands and is wireless is a big need. So I picked this thing up, and I've had it for about 6 months, and I love this thing so damn much that I actually reached out to Fantic, the makers of this tool, to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring a video. And if you watched last week's video, you saw the ad for this product. Now, this isn't on this list because they advertised with me. This was going to be on this list long before they said, sure, we like your channel. We think it's a good fit. This thing comes snugly, all the tools you need. There's like 35 different attachments for the heads. It's an easy thing to set off to the side or store away when it's not in use. And it's so good that one thing can be used for so much, whether I'm drilling out barrels, whether I'm buffing sections, whether I'm gutting out holes in a big diorama base, or whether I'm just sanding things down. This thing does it all. It also has 5 variable speeds. So if I'm going through plastic, I keep it on its lowest speed. But if I want to go through digging out a really heavy duty resin poured base or plinth, I can use a higher speed. So it really is customizable to my needs. One tool instead of the 5 or so I were using before this for this use. So yeah, when I bought this thing, I thought it would be pretty cool to use every now and again, but honestly, I've used it on just about every single model. If I ever need to do anything in terms of custom basing or even drilling out barrels or whatever, this thing gets the job done. Next one up proves that you can be small and cheap and still be extremely valuable in the hobby, and it's this little water trap filter for airbrushing. Now, our airbrush compressor tanks all come with a water trap already, but these things aren't exactly high-end, expensive scientific pieces of equipment, meaning more water is going to make its way through your airbrush line. This goes right into the top of your airbrush line. If I can, there we go. This one connects with a quick disconnect, which is another amazing tool. Make sure you use quick disconnects whenever possible. And this line connects to the trap, and then that trap can connect directly into whichever airbrush I'm using. So right before the air reaches my airbrush, it's got one final area to trap that water. And you would be surprised how much water this thing traps even when I'm just priming the model. What that means is I'm cutting way back on all the sputtering, the extra dilution that water is going to give to my paint, so my paint is very consistent and I don't get extra splatters or splotches, so I get much more control at no extra effort for this one cheap little piece of kit. Again, I use quick disconnects on all of my airbrushes and my airbrush line. This can pop right in there. I didn't plan on talking about quick disconnects, but if you airbrush, and even if you only have one airbrush, picking up quick disconnects lines for the airbrush, it means your airbrush while in use isn't always connected to your line. You can cause undue pressure, you could drop, or someone could trip over your line and break your airbrush. This way I can just store these away and tuck my line away. Quick disconnects, awesome. Water trap, also awesome. Oh, and before I forget, for everything that I'm showing off here today, I will put links down in the video description below. Some of those will be affiliate links, so if you wanted to support the channel, you can use those links. A big thank you for those of you that do that. Next up is something that I get a lot of questions about as well, and it's regards to my wet palette. No, it's not about the actual Game Envy wet palette. Of course, there is a custom Ninja version because it was my favorite wet palette in the world beforehand. What I'm really talking about are these little copper triangles. Again, simple and cheap, but these are also made by Game Envy. You can pick them up on their web store, same place that you get all their other cool hobby gadgets. And all these do are sit in the corners of your wet palette. And because they're made of copper, they keep away any mold, mildew, stink that builds up inside your wet palette with all that moisture. But equally as importantly, they keep your palette paper snug and down so it doesn't curl up on the edges when your wet palette starts to dry out. These also make setting up your wet palette easier. And here's how I set up my wet palette. I always waterlog my sponge all the way to the top with water until that water level is level with the top of the sponge. You want that sponge almost floating in the water. From there, I lay down my palette paper and I put the weights on two of the corners. Then I squeegee the paper all the way across and allow those bubbles to get pushed to the edges so we don't have any air bubbles underneath our paper. I then set down the other two weights, ensure that that paper gets all that moisture on the bottom side of it, and it's never gonna move an inch for the rest of my painting project. Another quick tip, since we're talking about wet palettes, is I make sure that my wet palette stays super hydrated and filled with water through the entire project. And every time I come back the next day to that same paint and that wet palette, I always refill it with one of these tattoo water bottles until that water level, once again, basically gets the sponge almost floating like a lily pad. This will make sure that your palette paper on top does not dry out and your paint is usable for much longer. Good posture is one of the most important factors in miniature painting. Luckily, today's sponsor, FlexiSpot, has your back. Ha! You know, when I first started miniature painting, I went from folding chair to cheap office chair to those big, cushy gaming chairs, and at the end of every painting session, I had a sore back and terrible posture. Luckily, the FlexiSpot C7 has some key features to ensure all of those troubles are a thing of the past. The forming lumbar support is a major factor here. It will meld and flex to your lower back, so no matter what your body shape, you'll have strong cushion support in the most important place. The super comfy latex padded seat has two factors that I've really come to value the most. First and foremost, it's got adjustable depth, so it fits my exact frame. And second of all, it's nice and breathable, so no more sweaty bum after a long session of painting or just doing some gaming at the desk. And the customization for this chair doesn't just stop there. There's a 4-level lockable backrest, there's adjustable footrest, there's adjustable armrests, and of course the ability to set the seat height to your ideal painting position. To me, the two most important things to invest in this hobby are a good light and a good chair. And with their 30-day money-back guarantee and 10-year warranty, you can tell that your butt is in good hands with FlexiSpot. Okay, I could have phrased that better, but you get the idea. You're not gonna find a better combination of quality and value. And if you use the link below and my code C750 at checkout, you get an extra $50 off. All right, there are no miniature branded paints on the list today. I use a ton of different brands and I love a ton of different brands, but there is a certain paint, not specifically marketed for miniature painters, that I got to talk about. You know, I've bought many different brands of fluorescent paints over the years, probably a half dozen or so different brands. And at the beginning, the main use for fluos that I found was just spray them through an airbrush to make something look like it glows, which there's nothing wrong with that. But over the last year or so, I've started to mix in fluorescent paints into my highlight colors whenever I'm highlighting up a model. I have found that this does not entirely change the color of those highlights because these are typically pretty low in opacity, but it gives a bit of ethereal glow, a bit of extra bump to the highlights that really makes them stand out, whether I'm painting for an army or painting for competition. Using fluorescent paints in highlights has really opened up my eyes to other things we can do to make our models pop. And the best brand for this, I have found by a good margin, are the Golden High Flow Fluos. These things, not only do you get way more paint for your dollar because they're in much bigger bottles and they're not marketed directly towards miniature painters, but they also have that nice pump to them. They're the perfect consistency, whether right through an airbrush or to just mix in to the paints right on your palette. These things will last me my entire lifetime with probably just one bottle of each of the 5 colors. And they are always on my painting desk for every miniature project this year. All right, let's talk about texture paints. Whether you want some sand, some mud, some grit, some gravel, some snow, whatever, on your basing, there are a lot of options in the texture paint world. And I've used just about every brand because for some reason, this kind of stuff really appeals to me. I love that moment when you place down some sand or mud texture paste on a base and it feels like the piece finally starts to come together. This year at Adepticon, I came across the new king of texture paste. In my mind anyway, it's called My Name is Mud by Bear Cavalry. So why is this stuff better than the rest? Well, it's extremely versatile. No matter what kind of ground basing, other than really fine sand and desert themes, I can make this stuff work. Anything from alien planets to a jungle floor. This stuff just looks real. It looks natural. The main reason why is that the grit and particulates suspended in this mixture have a wide variety in range of shapes and sizes. It just feels like things you'd find in nature. Most texture pastes are extremely uniform in the grit that's inside them. This stuff is all over the place. One of the reasons why it's so widely varied in what the shapes and sizes of the particulates inside are, because this stuff is made from recycled materials, which is amazing. We get to reuse cool things that weren't initially made for miniature painting, and they're non-toxic. So we're helping the environment a little bit, we're making our bases look more amazing, and the stuff can thin way down for really subtle work that you want on like boots and cloaks of your models, or you can cake it on super thick to have really dense looking nasty mud and earth. And everywhere in between. This is actually already my second jar of this stuff because I've used it on a number of big projects already, but it's really reasonably priced and now they're coming out with different colors as well. All right, final 2 are gonna be kind of quick hitters, and these things you may have heard me talk about or seen me use in videos prior, but I could not leave them out of this video because they've totally changed my workflow in miniature painting. First, epoxy putties, green stuff, milliput, epoxy sculpt. The list goes on of all the different kinds of putties that we can use, whether we're kit bashing, whether we're seam filling, whether we're sculpting. There's a lot of options, but I have found that the Tamiya epoxy putty quick, what's the name of this thing? It's got like 17 names. Tamiya epoxy putty quick type. 5 names, 1 good putty. The reason why it's so good is that it takes the best aspects of green stuff and the best aspects of milliput, and it does them both. For example, it's rubbery and pliable when it's fresh, meaning you can really form any kind of shape or push it into any crack you want. And as you let it set up for 10 or 15 minutes, you can get really fine, crisp details in your sculpting if you're looking to do that. And then once it's all the way dried, it's actually sandable. Green stuff isn't sandable. Milliput is sandable, but it's not as specifically exact and good for detail work. But this stuff is both of those. Again, it's a small thing, but I just find that this is always what I'm grabbing for these days. So if you haven't tried it and you've ever had frustrations with different kinds of putties, give it a go. All right, last but not least, let's talk about primers. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Since I've gone over to lacquer-based primers, learning from the Gundam grandfathers before us, I'm not going back to acrylic-based primers. These things are so silky smooth right out of the airbrush. They never clog my airbrush. They're super easy to clean off my airbrush. They create the thinnest of coats that's super hard and durable, so you never obscure any details. And as long as you make sure that you wear a mask, you've got good ventilation in your room, these things are super, super good. Again, I've never had any issues with my airbrush since I've been using these, and I had a lot of issues in the past with my airbrushes that all was based on using acrylic primers. You just want to make sure that you use the official leveling thinner to thin down your primer before you start spraying, and then you can just go to your local hardware store and get some lacquer thinner. Odorless is probably good if you want to keep all your brain cells, but this stuff is super cheap, and you'll be good to go for priming. I did want to mention that when I'm painting big batches of things or the weather sucks and I just don't want to get out my airbrush, I am so impressed with the new rattle cans by Pro Acryl. This stuff is amazing, as well it should be, because it is in collaboration with Colorforge out of the UK. I've been wanting to get Colorforge primers for forever because they are so silky smooth since I tried them over in the UK, and now that they're offered in the USA by Pro Acryl, we get to support two amazing companies that I stand behind. So let's get this stuff. So there they are, the 8 products that since I've been using them, I have been extremely happy, and I find myself using them whenever possible in basically just about every single project. Some of them literally every project. And I thought that since I had such great experience with them, I would share that information with you. But I do not want this to be a one-way street. I love learning what great things you love in the hobby. Many of the products that I use have been on your recommendation. So let's keep this communication wavelength going. Let me know down in the comments below if there are certain products you can't live without, certain things you found recently that you just love. I promise I read all those comments, and I will make more purchases and come back to report to all of you what things I really find exciting and worthwhile in our hobby. Speaking of worthwhile hobby products, I want to thank each and every one of you that have gone out there and pre-ordered the deck of many colors, the 250 card decks. So it's 100 unique color schemes for your miniatures that you can paint up, and they're going to be sexy with foiling and everything. Your support has been amazing. The pre-order window is still open, so check out the link down below. If you haven't yet, you can see all the details about what these are to see if there's something you want to add to your hobby kit as well. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a couple of fun painting projects that I need to get back to because they are calling my name. Don't worry, I'll be back next week with another new video. Just make sure that sometime between now and then, you find time in your day to slay the gray.